In the past 12 months, Microsoft Learning released a ton of amazing features, such as the free practice test for every exam, the exam sandbox, where if you've never taken an exam before, you can practice questions before you get into the stressful environment of the exam. But the next feature that Microsoft Learn is working on might be a bit more controversial. Most Microsoft exams will now be open book. Now, while I do most of those videos around certifications alone, today I'm honored to have a very special guest with us, Liberty Munson, Director of Psychometrics at Microsoft. Hello, Liberty. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I'm happy to talk about this stuff.
Awesome. Liberty, you're of course a star for everybody that follows the tech community, Microsoft Learn blog, and you've been on Twitter in the community for certification takers for over 15 years now. But for those of you that never met you before, can you do a quick introduction as well as tell us what does a director of psychometrics do?
Well, everybody wonders that question. Even my parents still wonder what it is I do. So basically, my job is to ensure that whatever tool or process we use to evaluate skills is valid and reliable so that when someone earns a Microsoft credential, it actually means something. They have the skills that they need to be successful in their job role. Or if we're talking about fundamentals, they have a basic understanding of Azure, Microsoft 365, or Dynamics 365. So you're probably wondering, like, how did I get here? I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology, which is essentially the science of creating more productive workforces. And one of the ways you do that is by hiring the right people, and you do that with testing. And so whether you realize it or not, an interview is a test. So after graduate school, I went and I worked at Boeing in their employee selection team for a while. And then I got moved into the employee survey because another great way to create productive workforces is to understand what motivates people. And you do that with survey research. A few years into that, I kind of had an aha moment. I'm weird. That wasn't the aha. I just love tests or exams or assessments, whatever you want to call them. And Microsoft was hiring a psychometrician. And so although it wasn't in selection testing, a test is a test. And so I came to work at Microsoft as their psychometrician more than 16 years ago. And I love my job. I am unusual at Microsoft, as many of you probably know, for being in the same role for so long. But every day is a new challenge. I love what I do. And I love it. It's really powerful if you think about it, that with a few well-crafted questions, you can really understand what someone's strengths and weaknesses are. And there's just a lot of power in helping somebody understand that about themselves so that you can set them on the right path.
And it's definitely a big challenge as well on finding the right balance, which in the past, I mean, I've not been in the industry as much as you have, but so many big changes in the Microsoft certification world in the past even 10 years, from only multi-choice exams to labs to fill in the blanks. Wow, so many things have changed, which is amazing to see the evolution and having the tools to test all those kinds of scenarios. It's really great. But let's go directly into the main topic, because I'm sure most of the people that are listening to us today, this is the first time they actually hear about this open book initiative. So I prepared a few slides. Of course, I wanted to get a real demo, but I prepared a few things for everybody to see. We don't have access, of course, to the real life question environment. That is secured. We don't have a proctor with us to make sure me and Liberty are not cheating today. So if we recap, I'll do my best to recap a bit, and Liberty, please jump in. Let's see if I did a good job understanding, and I'm going to pass the test about open book exams. The goal is, in the open book exam is not all the web. People are going to have access to learn.microsoft.com, which, by the way, for all of you professionals, Microsoft Docs is now also under learn.microsoft.com. So you really have access to all of the learning packs, to all of the PowerShell documentation, for example, things like that. All of it is under that Learn umbrella. But there are a few things that we don't have access to, right? We don't have access to the Q&A, which is a bit like, I don't want to call it like that, but Microsoft Stack Overflow. So forums where people ask questions, you have answered, things like that, and their profile. Is there a reason why those two in particular, Liberty, or where did this exception come from?
So with the question and answer, I kind of don't want you to be able to go and ask a question on the exam and get an answer. In theory, you could do that if you had access to the Q&A. And I do know that Microsoft is thinking about how we embed AI into the Q&A experience. And so I do have some concerns about what that would look like from an exam perspective. So we're just blocking it to make sure that you don't get on any help that would be inappropriate for an exam experience. And then the profile is blocked because it's actually the way the MSA works. It takes you through a different domain than Learn. And that got super complicated when we were trying to solve for it. So we just decided, let's just simplify it, leave it as the learn.microsoft.com domain, except for the Q&A and the profile. And you can have access to anything in that domain. And as Microsoft's technical content location, it seemed like the right thing to give people access to as a resource during the exam.
Awesome. And next up, extra time is not being added. So, of course, if we recap a bit the exam durations, and for all of you that took a Microsoft certification, you know that we don't know the exact number of questions in advance. It will depend on each exam, and even between exam takers, not everybody might have the same number of exams. But for advanced and expert role, associated and expert, role-based exams, you have 100 minutes for 40 to 60 questions. Is my memory good? Yes,
Yes.
perfect. So even if it's an open book exam, extra time is not being added. So you might have anywhere from 2 minutes, maybe, like say around, depending on how lucky you get with the questions. So still, you're not able to go on Learn for every single question to try and find the answer. Was this a consideration to add extra time, or was that from the start no extra time added?
From the start, there was never an intention to add extra time because this is a resource, much like the calculator. We don't design our exams so that you would be able to go and look up the answer to every question. The idea is to only use this when somebody would say, you know what, in my real job, I just wouldn't remember what that is off the top of my head. I'd go look it up. So that's what we're trying to do with this experience, is make it a little bit more like what happens in the real world, where there are certain things where you think, I just don't have the brain space to remember that. So why would I memorize it for a certification exam when I would just go look it up? So it's in those instances where you see a question that's asking you about something you'd normally go look up. Now we're giving you the opportunity to look it up. And it shouldn't be something that you can or should be doing with every question, because remember, our questions on our advanced role-based exams are really focused on your ability to apply your experience with the technology to solve a problem. And those questions really don't lend themselves to always being able to look it up to find the answer. You actually have to have that experience. And in most cases, that's how you will answer the questions. But in those few cases where you would normally have said to me in the past, why would you make me memorize this? Or I would just go look it up. Here's your opportunity to do so.
Awesome. And the last one, I kind of feel like I should have put this one towards the beginning, but this will only be available on advanced role-based exams, which it means associate, expert, and specialty exams, and not on fundamentals. I think I understand why, because fundamentals is a lot more what Microsoft product will help you with this business scenario. It's not as what PowerShell commandlet and what parameter do you run, but was there ever any consideration to also have it on fundamentals, or how was the thought process to only make it for more advanced exams?
So I think that there were a lot of people on my team that thought maybe we should include fundamentals, but to me, it doesn't make sense because fundamentals really is more knowledge-based. And in that case, quite literally, you could go and look up every question. And that's not what we're trying to do with this. That's not what at least what I'm trying to do by making this available on exams. I really want it to be something where you would look it up because you would literally look it up on your job, versus with something that's knowledge based like fundamentals, then we're not really testing anything. We're testing your ability to go and find the answers. And it's supposed to be, fundamentals is really supposed to be about understanding the basics of our core technologies, not so much your ability to go find the answer.
Awesome. And fundamentals exams, you only get 45 minutes for 40 to 60 questions. So it goes by so fast sometimes. I don't think many people would even have time to really go find all of them. But you're right, if the fundamentals you should really know. It's all about the basics, the knowledge. So how will this look like? So I have a few examples here. So you're in a question, the interface still looks exactly the same, but one button gets added at the bottom, Microsoft Learn here that has a square near it, and it shows up on every single question, right? Whether it's a multiple choice, even if it's a scenario, things like that. Does it also show up if you have a lab? Do you have access to it or no?
That's a really good question. We're trying to figure out how it would be implemented with labs. And because you actually have you get access to the actual Azure environment, you do have a version, if you will, of this because you have access to the help within Azure. So that's kind of what the experience will look like today. But we are trying to figure out if it makes sense to add that icon to our lab questions too.
Okay.
But when we launch this, it won't be available. But just remember, you are actually in the environment when you take a lab exam. So you do have access to a version of this experience. I don't think people ever realized it. I don't know. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but you do have it because you have access to help in Azure or Microsoft 365.
I never realized I had access. I guess I was just so expecting not to have access. I never really tried, but uh, labs is usually when I need this the least because that's when I feel a bit home. I'm like, yes, I'm in the lab now. I know what to do. The experience kicks in, and you don't even think at searching for details, things like that. But that's an awesome point. That's available even today, even if your exam is not open book. You have access to help. I learned something new today. Awesome. So when you click on that button, you'll have Microsoft Learn, the Microsoft Learn homepage that will open up. And from here, you have access to searching all of Microsoft Learn, right? Well, everything, of course, except Q&A and my profile that we've already talked, they are not working. And you can even open multiple tabs. You don't know how much I'm in love with the fact that you can have multiple tabs because that's how my brain works when I work on stuff in real life. Sometimes you look at something, you need the PowerShell commandlet, you need multiple tabs at the same time to view it all in one place. So this will work in the exam as well. Is there a limit or there's no real limit on the tabs?
There's no limit. And actually, we started looking at some of the data with the early releases, and people are opening up quite a lot of tabs. So we don't have an upper limit. And people are, I think, maybe trying to see if we do.
People are testing it out. And do the tabs, let's say I finish a question, I go to the next one. If I click the Microsoft Learn button, will it keep where I am at right now, or does it reset every question?
Right now, it's set up so that whatever tabs you had open should open again.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I guess if you keep opening, and do not close them, you're gonna have quite a few at the end. So don't forget to clear them out, especially if you're doing it on your own computer at home and you don't have a performant computer. Try to close some of them to help the exam be faster. And you can also go full screen. And you told me a bit before the interview, it's not only half or full screen. You have the flexibility of really going. I don't really see it on the slides, but I guess we have a slider that we can just go and see. Do you want 10% question, 90% learn, or you can move it as you want, right?
So, yep, the splitter bar. So there's a splitter bar you can't see in the screenshots, but there's a splitter bar between learn and the question, and you can just move that just like you would on like any device that you had.
Okay, that is pretty awesome, and I guess that's very good for, in a way, accessibility as well for everybody to be able to adapt to what they need. And are we able to zoom in as well if needed? Zoom in, zoom out, things like that.
Yes, yeah, it's all
That's
been
awesome.
this whole feature has been, reviewed by our accessibility team, and it meets our minimum requirements for us to go live. It's not perfect, right? Because I wanted to get this out, so and I didn't want perfection to get in the way of good enough because I think this feature is really, really valuable. But Microsoft is continuing to improve accessibility throughout the exam, and this will certainly be improved as part of that process.
Awesome. And the question that everybody probably has is, if I have a browser, what stops me from trying to go to another site, which I'm sure is one of the first things you implemented. You get a beautiful warning at the top which says access denied. So if you try to open up something else, go on any other site, you'll get this access denied error. Is that something that will kind of tell the proctor, hey, Vlad tried to access something, put some extra attention on them? Does a red light go off somewhere, or is it just the system blocking you?
So right now we are actually tracking all the websites people try to get to because we want to make sure that this is showing up when it should be showing up. So what we've learned, we've kind of found some interesting things that we've learned so far. As expected, people who are trying to get to links from Learn that go outside of the Learn domain are being blocked. So if there are some links on Learn that go to GitHub, for example,
Mm.
those are going to be blocked, and that's by design. But we actually had a case recently where they were as and it was an aka.ms link. So if you're not familiar with that, that's kind of our short link. And it was going to another place on Learn, so it should have worked. But because we are tracking all the sites people are trying to get to, we found that and we actually implemented a fix with that pretty quickly. So now if it's a link that's even an aka.ms link that's going to another Microsoft Learn site, it will work. But we are tracking all of that to make sure that this feature is working as expected. And almost daily, I want to say daily, it may be a little bit less frequent than that. We're going in and looking at all the sites to make sure that people aren't finding holes in my security because I want this to be an experience that's valuable, but I don't want people to be obviously be able to get anywhere in the internet because we know that's just fraught with problems. And because we are tracking all of that, if we did see somebody who's like keeps trying to, let's just say bounce off the walls, trying to see where they can get to, that's probably going to throw some red flags. And I might be doing a little bit more investigation into those users' behaviors and why they might be trying to do that.
I'm sure some people try. People love to try. Whenever there's a new feature, sometimes some people just like to try and break it. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's really good to know. And I know uh, you you're very implicated into the whole process. You look at question reviews, comments that people put on the exam. So I'm not surprised you're looking at every site that people try to access as well and see which ones keep popping up there. Anything that we missed a bit of the overview of the experience? Again, we couldn't do a live demo because of how the secure exam experience works, but anything that we have missed on how the whole process will work?
No, I think that this was a great overview of what to expect, and I hope who the people who are watching this will actually take some time and play around with this, so we can get more data around what's working and what's not, and making sure that it is as good of experience as possible.
And one question I had for you, just fresh out of my mind, will this also be there in the exam sandbox experience? Well, is this something that people will be able to play with before the exam, or maybe not yet?
It won't be because the trick is the sandbox. What's cool about this is that we're able to let you get to learn in a lockdown browser experience, which means and the sandbox is not locked down. So we could light it up, except that you actually can get to any
Anywhere.
location, right? Because it's not locked down. And so we've talked about this a lot, like what this would look like in the sandbox. And right now we can't really figure out a way to incorporate it in the sandbox in a way that makes sense because we don't have that ability to lock down the sandbox in the same way it's going to be locked down on the exam. That's the trick with the sandbox. But the really cool thing we were able to solve for exams is that we are able to get out of the secure browser in a way that limits you to a very specific domain, and that's all you can get access to. Like, this is, in my opinion, this is quite an innovation and quite revolutionary in the way you think about high stakes certification exams.
Definitely. Okay, so thank you very much, first of all, for going through the process with us. Now, a big question I had is, what brought you here? Were the recent announcements by Microsoft and every other tech company out there about artificial intelligence and how from now on, instead of reading emails, we'll have Copilot read them for us and write them for us. Uh, do we still need tech professionals? And has this kind of AI revolution made you implement open book exams, since people don't know to need everything by heart anymore?
So I actually started working on this project, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. I don't
Wow.
know that people realize this, but I do read every comment people leave on their exams. And I was getting enough comments where people would say, I would look that up or I wouldn't memorize this and things like that, that I was trying to figure out a way to kind of balance what my SMEs were saying. When I saw comments like that, I'd go and I'd talk to my SMEs. My SMEs would say, no, people need to know that. But what my candidates are saying is, no, I don't. I'd go look that up. So for probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I started trying to figure out, how do I find the right balance so it's a more realistic and relevant evaluation of somebody's skills in these cases where they say, I would go look this up, but my SMEs are saying, no, people should know it. So what's the right balance? The right balance is giving people who think they would go look it up the opportunity to do so without compromising what the exam is trying to do, which is why we're not adding more time. We're not
Yeah.
changing the way we write the questions. They're still going to be problem focused, but on those handful of questions where somebody would go look it up, that's what the learn experience is all adding the learn experience was all about. In terms of AI, that's a very interesting question, because I do think that does, I think with the adding open book and adding the ability to access learn does create some interesting opportunities for us to maybe lead the way in the way we think about how AI is being used in job roles and how we can potentially figure out how to assess that on our certification exam. So now we've figured out how to give people access to something they
Yeah.
wouldn't normally have access to in a secure environment, which means extend that logic to generative AI solutions and Copilot. What does that look like on a cert exam? I think that's the next big thing.
But wow, so you've been working on it for 4 to 5 years. That is wow, and I agree with you. Sometimes for many things, I know it by heart. Experience kicks in. I know what to do, but sometimes you have some of those. I'm an IT pro, so I have to say PowerShell questions that it is asking you for what are the 5 parameters you would put in order, and I'm like, that's the kind of thing I would look up, and I know the commandlet, but I don't know all the thousands of parameters by heart. But I guess, like you said, knowing where to look, knowing, okay, this is the commandlet I would need. Those are the kind of, knowing where to look is where experience kicks in. The exact thing you need to pass, that stuff you would look up, and that's the right balance that this allows us to have.
I
That's
hope
uh,
so.
that's the goal. Now, let me ask you a tougher question. Now, there's three things that are sure in life: debt, taxes, and people arguing online about the value of Microsoft certifications. Whatever certification video I put, somebody will put in the comments that Microsoft certifications or IT certifications are not worth anything. And I'm sure this is something that came up as you worked with your team on this. People brought up the fact that this might decrease the value of Microsoft certification, since everybody knows it's an open book exam. What would you say to those people?
First, I would say it's not open book in the same way that you're probably thinking about open book. I I do have a little bit of regret about calling it open book, but it was the best way to kind of capture this. But when you think about open book and your experiences with that when you were in high school or college, you actually took open book, you took it home, you had all the time you wanted to do it. It was basically expected. You'd look up all of the answers to everything that was part of that experience. But that's not what this is. This is just giving you access to a resource that for those times when you would maybe go look something up. You should not be using it for every question. We're not giving you enough time to use it for every question. And I think if you did use it for every question, you're not going to pass the exam. So I think the way we've designed the experience so that it is truly more of a resource that's available in your exam for use when you need it versus you shouldn't rely on it. In fact, if people are changing their study habits because they know it's going to be available, they're not setting themselves up for success. Nothing is really changing about the way we ask the questions, the type of questions, what the questions are intended to do. So don't change the way you study because you know it's going to be there. I think that will set you up for failure. But in those cases where, you know what, I would go look it up, you have the ability to do it. We're not giving you any extra time or anything like that. So I would argue this makes the experience more relevant to people because it's allowing them to do those things that they would normally do when they were trying to solve that problem on their job. It is not something that would be useful in that you really won't have time to look up the answer for everything. And in fact, you won't be able to because most of our questions don't really lend for that anyway.
Okay, but the questions, you've mentioned it twice already. So you're not changing any of the existing question bank when this feature rolls out, and the question distribution between, let's say, amount of multi-choice, amount of lab, amount of scenario will not change. So really, you're just giving a tool that people would have in the real life. You now have it in the exam, but when you're working with your subject matter experts to write questions, they don't have any specific instructions to don't copy as is from Microsoft Learn because people will search for it. There's
They
still
shouldn't be doing that anyway. And if they do, I'm really mad. But yeah, the instructions to our SMEs haven't changed about how we write questions and how they need to be aligned to the objective domain and how they have to be kind of really problem focused, like problems that Azure administrators really face as it aligns to the OD or developers or whatever the job role is. None of that has changed. You'll still have case studies. You'll still have to understand how the technology actually works to solve problems that probably aren't covered in the detail you'd need them to be covered on Learn anyway.
Awesome. Okay, now next question. One of the sad things that I've seen lately on social media, especially on LinkedIn, which makes me even more sad, is IT professionals, developers asking about dumps, promoting dumps on social media, and with their real account. It's like nobody reads what that whole paragraph on on using those and how they can cancel all your Microsoft certifications. Is one of your hopes to implement this feature for people to uh, stop using those, stop paying even for dumps? Was that one of the goals when you started working on this initiative?
So it wasn't a direct goal of this initiative, but I do think that there is a perception that some of the questions are memorization. And when that happens, I do think you have more people. I think there's a higher likelihood that somebody might go out and look for dumps because they're like, oh, Microsoft's just asking us to memorize stuff. So in theory, it could have an impact, but I've been in this industry too long to
There will
think
always
it
be
would be a
cheaters. No
real,
matter
significant impact.
no matter what industry, there will always be cheaters. You're never going to be able to take out 100% of them. That's unfortunately the truth. But I do agree with you. I think a lot of people that thought, well, this is only memorization. I'm really good at my job, but since I have to memorize, I'm going to use those illegal dumps. Now, hopefully, they're going to be like, hey, I can do the exam with the same resources that I would do my job. So I don't need to get those anymore. I don't need to encourage the companies that create those anymore. So hopefully it'll have a good effect on the industry as well.
Yeah, me too. I hope.
Let's hope so. And that I think will have a way bigger impact on the value of certifications than uh, increasing those than the the perception of the open book exam. Now, something that you already talked about it before, but as a MCT, I have my shirt here with the MCT logo. I create a ton of training, and it's part of my job to train people on certification exams. And do you think that the way people study will change knowing that they have this resource? Do you think less people are going to take certification boot camps and things like that? What impact do you think it will have?
If we did it right and people believe what I'm saying, it will have no impact, right? Because it's not something somebody should be using for every question, as I've said. And it's really, I think as a trainer, you could talk a little bit about if, you keep talking about PowerShell commands and things like
Yeah,
that. Like when I see questions like that and I don't remember what the commandlet is, where do I go and find that? So kind of maybe changing the skill set a little bit when it comes to those things. Like you're not going to have to memorize the commandlets anymore
yeah,
because of the way Microsoft is giving this resource. But you still have to have experience. You still have to know how the technology works to solve a particular problem. Those are the kinds of things you're not going to be able to look up. But when you have, like, I'm not memorizing commandlets, you don't have to
yeah.
anymore. But fundamentally, I would say 90% of the way somebody prepares is going to stay the same
Awesome.
or should stay the
Should stay the same.
same.
One last question for you, Liberty. Other than the Open Book Exam initiative, is there anything else exciting that Microsoft is working on in the world of certifications? Any new cool projects or things you would like to share, even if it's early?
There is always something going on because that's why you said like at very beginning of this about how in the last 10 years lots of things have changed, and I am like I want to be the leader. I want Microsoft certifications to be the best IT certification somebody can earn, and I want to lead the industry in the way we think about skills evaluation and all of that stuff. And I am really passionate about ensuring our experience is as accessible as possible. And so I think you're going to start seeing some changes in the exam UI and things like that so we can increase the accessibility. Our goal is to make exams delightful. Now, I know that's kind of funny because how can an exam be delightful? But I am talking about like how you interact with it, knowing where you're at in the exam, knowing how many case studies you have, making it look and feel like it's, from this century, maybe. I don't know. Like the last time we did a major UI update was when we had Modern. Remember that?
It's
It's
been a
like,
while. Yeah,
yes. So, those are the kind of the big things remember, I want to lead the industry. I want Microsoft certifications to be the best. And the way we think about skills evaluation and things like that, Microsoft's number one. And it's going to be the most accessible experience when it comes to a high stakes certification exam.
awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing the updates, and I'm looking forward to seeing an update to the UI. Even if for now, for me, I've done over 20, 30 exams. It almost feels like home. So I'm used to it, but already having that exam sandbox, I know for a lot of my students, s- tests are never fun. I find them fun, but tests are never fun for most people. Already not knowing what the interface looks like can be a big stress for some people, and they get lost in the UI. They can't even think at that question. So having the exam sandbox already helped a lot with that, and I'm so looking forward to see what cool changes we're gonna have in the rest of the interface.
I think it's going to
Well,
be awesome.
Liberty, I know you're super busy, so thank you so much from me and on behalf of all the Microsoft certification takers. We really appreciate when we get the chance to talk to the people in charge, the people that actually work every day on those features and uh, learn the reasons behind why some things are implemented. It's always very appreciated. So thank you so much again for taking the time to record this with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And for all of you watching, thank you so much. I really hope you found this valuable. And please let me know what you think in the comments. Now, I am pretty lucky. Before this interview, I knew about this functionality for about a few weeks. It took me a bit of time to fully wrap my head around the impact it will have on when I go take a certification. So please let me know what you think in the comments, whether you think this is the most awesome thing ever, or whether you think this will have a negative impact on the way that Microsoft certifications are perceived. Please put out your comments in there. Of course, be respectful as always. And remember to see all the latest announcements about certifications. Follow the Microsoft Learn blog on Tech Community. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on YouTube. So thank you very much again, everyone. And I really hope you enjoyed.